Hello, welcome back to Media Snack, live from New York.
Greetings from London.
So last week, mate, we were talking about the role of the media director,
Yes,
which we'll link to here. Really important that everybody kind of knows exactly what a media director does. But obviously behind a great media director is a great team. And that team, the shape of that team and the capabilities of an internal media team within the marketing org is critical to success. And smart advertisers are trying to think, how to plan out that structure and the capabilities that they need. So let's discuss that. Welcome to Media Snack, the live weekly show where we unpack the important questions that you will have about media, agencies, marketing, and more. If you're new to the channel, it's great to have you join us. Subscribe below to get alerts of all upcoming weekly episodes. In this episode, we're going to give you 3 tips if you're thinking about how to build out your media capabilities within your marketing org. So if you're a media director or a marketer, or anybody else, actually, if you've got a kind of perspective or you're curious about what media capabilities are being built within marketing organizations, that's what we're going to unpack. And as I say, kind of give you 3 tips. If you stay to the end, you'll hopefully learn a little bit about how to stay ahead of that capabilities race, because there's a little bit of an arms race going on. So there's fighting for capabilities and talent going on by marketers. So maybe some of our tips could be helpful for you. So reminder, we're streaming live, so please leave questions down below. Any questions or comments that you have on the show while we go are greatly appreciated. We love it. So, mate, question of the week. What capabilities do media departments need?
Absolutely. And what capabilities do they need now? So, last week we talked at length around the role of the media director and the capabilities and the strengths and relative weaknesses of that role within the organization. Today, we're going to talk about the team below that media director and how important it is as media becomes more instrumental and as a strategic kind of lever within an organization, far more than it actually probably was when I was a media director. I mean, as I said last week, I was more of an agency manager and facilitator of internal media decisions. Now the role of a media director internally is far more strategic, and with that, far more complex. And so the capabilities that a media director needs to rely on in order to make the right internal decisions, I think becomes far more complicated. And so, and we saw this from a really good report that came out of the WFA. They conducted a survey amongst their members and began to identify where the biggest gaps were within internal media capabilities. And a couple of things kind of came up when we were kind of reviewing the report. The first one, by the way, which I loved, was that global media teams have increased by 60% in the last 3 years. Now, I love that. We've been talking about, brands taking greater control, having more influence over decision-making internally. And that's an illustration, 60% increase in media teams internally. So what are the big gaps within those teams? And the report kind of identified 4 big kind of dark spots, black spots, if you like, within internal kind of teams. The first is around e-commerce and shoppable kind of marketing. So bringing in capabilities to help inform decision-making around that is critical. The second area that there was a significant gap around was in measurement. And I suppose the sophistication of being able to understand econometric modeling, attribution modeling, as greater linkages are going to be made between business outcomes and media inputs. Having specialists internally that can articulate smart, sophisticated econometric modeling results is absolutely kind of critical. The third one was transparency. Surprisingly, given that we've been banging on about transparency for the last kind of 10 years. But I suppose that transparency debate is around digital transparency as that becomes a more prominent feature within the spending profile of many brands. And then the fourth gap is around in-housing, helping decide what that in-housing roadmap should kind of look like. So big challenges, and we talked about talent gaps within the agency side. Talent gaps also exist within the brand side, and as you say, it's a big battleground where both platforms, agencies, and brand side marketeers are fighting for a fairly shallow pool of talented resource.
Yeah, I mean, I think on the talent part, I think marketers are in a good place. Going back 5, 6, 10 years, young people coming into the industry really were attracted to agencies, and we'd heard that in those times it was difficult for media departments to really find really good talent.
Yeah.
Now I think it's a far more compelling and exciting proposition to be on the brand side. It feels a lot more dynamic, and as we say in media, I mean, you have a lot more control these days within a media org, within the on the client side, than you would do on the agency side. And I think we've seen many examples of really good agency talent being now picked up on the marketer side as they build their own capabilities, and they're taking some more traditional marketing educated people perhaps, and also drawing some talent out of agencies as well, and blending those together. And we'll come on actually to just talk about some of the cultural challenges of that. It's difficult to build agency-like capabilities internally. Sometimes it's a bit oil and water culturally, so you have to kind of be careful about how you build this over time. But it's true. So media leadership's expanded, media's got more complicated, all these things, lack of transparency, all headaches for the typical media director, as we've discussed a lot. But the opportunity exists now for them to take much more control in decision making in media, and that's what's leading to this. There's two things driving this. One is that you have the technological capabilities now to have a bit more visibility out of the process. You can put hands on keyboards, as people say. Yeah. The other thing is that generally, marketing organizations are far more data and insight rich than they used to be. So across almost all categories, the marketer tends to now get much more feedback from the market. They're better connected to their sales organization. They have better understanding of their customers, whether they really have much first-party data or not. They're typically building better understanding of their consumers, and they're owning a lot of that data. They're not just relying on the agencies or others to give them that information. So they've got better insight. And often the marketer, we say this a lot, the marketer often has access and is privy to very sensitive commercial information that they don't always want to share with agencies and other external partners. So actually it positions the marketing organization to be potentially very powerful if they get the right resources together to analyze not just market and media and marketing data, but also their internal sales data. And you start to match these things together, you get a much better sense of what works to drive an outcome. And if you can understand what works to drive an outcome, you get to this holy grail that we've been talking about for 10 years, which is that you understand the value of media and not just the cost of media. You don't just go buy media, you start to invest in media because you invest in things that produce an outcome. And then it doesn't matter really what the price is, you pay based on what you think it's worth. That is where we want all marketers to get to, really truly understand the value of media and not just the price of media. Anyway, we'll come on to that. That's probably another episode that's yet to come. Where are they building capabilities? Building capabilities, we've seen a lot of brands try to replicate the kind of agency model by trying to build some kind of agency resources in-house. Very rarely works. Very rarely works as a standalone. Very rarely works where you start to put just hands on keyboards, or you hire more that executional end of the process. Where it's been successful and where we advise the companies that we work with is to think much more at the top end, at the strategic end. Really think about data, analytics, insight, strategy. That's really areas that you can own. Planning, media, implementational planning, you may do that, but you probably want to start working with agencies, obviously, and collaborate with agencies. And on the execution, on the buying, don't rush into that, okay? Yeah. So really think about the top end and the more strategic stuff. And when you start to think of yourself like an investor of media, it's like being an investor in anything. You actually take a very different point of view. I think we've probably said it 207 times across 207 episodes, but you aspire to think of media as an investment in growth and not the cost of the business. And if you can get your team and your organization and your company to think like that, you start to make better decisions because you do your research, you understand what media works, you know your market, and you make investment decisions to optimize the return from that investment. It's a really good mindset. We want all CMOs to be, encouraging their media organizations to think like that, and vice versa. The pandemic's had an impact, of course, because it triggered media directors to really think about where their money was going and their and consumer media habits and lots of things. You mentioned one of the big things that came out of the insights that came out of the WFA report was this, concern about, e-commerce and shopper marketing and things like that. Even companies that were investing in that, often they were siloed away, not necessarily under the remit or the control or the direction of a media director. But we're seeing more and more of those things being brought into the media org because they are investments in outcomes, and they need to be far better integrated into broader media investment. So these are some of the things that's going on. It's important, to understand. There's some really good insight. I keep pointing down here because I've got the report here. Some really good insight in the WFA report, but it's kind of general. It gives you a general picture. You have to explore it on your own and start with some kind of self-analysis, I suppose. So let's just think about some 3 tips. I know you've got some good advice for media directors about building capabilities now, if you're thinking about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first starting point is as it was when I was a media director. Have a vision for media. If you can create a manifesto for media, if you can begin to start illustrating internally why media is an investment for growth, then everything stems from that. So have a point of view on media and the role that it plays in driving business growth. That's the first thing.
I don't know. We say that, we do say that a lot. Have a vision for media. But we go into lots of companies and they don't have a vision for media. And not that we should expect that anybody's listening to us at all, but sometimes that can feel a bit fluffy and woolly, can't it? But it has real practical application because it sets the tone and tells everybody what you're trying to do. It's really important.
If your vision for media is around savings and discounts and rebates, then it points you down a cost route. It's around value and growth and sustainable growth, then it's packaged around an investment strategy, right? So that's really, really important. Have a vision and bang the drum on that vision. Understand what your internal capability gaps are, right? That's kind of critical. But then vitally create a business case for change. Every organization that I have ever spoken to that has successfully and effectively built an internal media team has done it not through knee-jerk reaction, not through just going out and creating job description and requiring talent to come in, but has been based on a use case. It's been based on a commercial business case that illustrates the value of building a stronger, more effective internal team in delivering greater effectiveness of that media investment. So create a business case is absolutely vital. And then have a roadmap. Don't assume that you're going to be able to fill the business with e-shopper experts, econometric data scientists, and in-housing specialists all at the same time. But have a roadmap that will allow you to illustrate internally the progression that you're making, and also evaluate how that broadening team, bigger team, is actually effectively driving greater investment of your media output. And in the meantime, whilst you're going along that roadmap journey, use the agency to compensate for your internal gaps and illustrate again how a seamless partnership with your agency partners can drive greater effectiveness of your company's media investments.
Very good. Like that. So, I mean, in some of the work that we've done over the years in these areas, and we found probably the last 5 years or so, marketers, much more open and interested in really designing their own internal organization. These what we call the operating model for media, because of the opportunity to do so, but secondly the need to do so as things got more complicated and the opportunity for control increases. What we've done traditionally is you start with this diagnostic that you talk about. That's the first thing to do, which is a relatively low friction, painless exercise. But it's really important to step back, and it's a more sophisticated SWOT analysis of where you are, as you just mentioned. So identify those gaps and the strengths and the opportunities to change. Define that vision. Where are we right now? Where do we want to be? Which gives you your roadmap. often media directors would say to us, we need to know what to do now, next, and future, or tell me what not to do right now, because sometimes it's so overwhelming as a media director. You think you always think that you're lagging behind everybody else, which is a common refrain we often hear from people. We're not as good as everybody else. I'm sure people are better than us.
Yeah.
Not true. You are where you are on your journey, and so you've got to just really understand what you've got right now, really understand, paint a picture of the future, and then have a roadmap, because it takes time to build.
Yeah, definitely.
I mentioned earlier, some of where these things maybe don't work is often because of cultural misalignment. If you making a business case for a media organization is really interesting. They're very compelling documents because they're based on commercial imperatives. Really interesting, but it's tempted to kind of go out and just hire and build, and you can spend a year trying to build, but you've got to be patient with it, because you're often bringing into the organization people who maybe have not worked in a marketing department before, maybe have not worked on the advertiser side before, are bringing in highly specialized or technical skills which don't often sit comfortably with a traditional role of a brand manager or brand marketer. And so that's where we find we have to do quite a lot of work there to just think about how we build the culture of that team. It doesn't exist by itself. It requires really strong leadership from the media director, and you've got to have that vision. You've got to be able to articulate that vision consistently over a year or two as you build that out. And also keep endorsing it and being an advocate for success of that across all your adjacent functions internally, because it's not cheap to build these capabilities, and there'll be expectations. So you've got to set very realistic expectations, manage those expectations. What does success look like? And we lay those across a roadmap so that we can tell a good story over time.
Yeah. I mean, I just to build on your original point, just before we came live today, I was talking to a media director, global media director, and we were talking about diagnostic, and we were talking about our approach to conducting diagnoses. And he said to me, what I really want is I want you to find areas that I need to improve on. Don't be afraid to illustrate areas that we need to improve as an organization. It might feel counterintuitive if you're a media director and there's a bit of a spotlight being shined on your media department, right? You don't want
to be brave.
Yeah. Exactly. But his point was, if you come back and tell me that everything is fine, and I report back to my bosses, then the focus will move away from media and go on to another part of the business that needs improving. He said, don't do that. I need to have constant management, senior level focus and investment to enable me to establish the media department and media function that I need. Therefore, be critical in areas where you think I underperform against what you consider to be best practice. And I love that as a sense of philosophy. That was kind of what I was like as a media director.
Yeah, very good. Excellent. Well, let us know what you think. Feel free to leave comments down below, please. And as always, send us questions, any questions that you have that you'd like us to address on a future show. We've got a nice long list of those building, so appreciate those. If you like the episode, please give us a thumbs up, because it helps other people like you find this channel. Really appreciate it. But that's it for this week. See you next time.
Bye for now.
Media Snack is brought to you each week by ID Comms, the award-winning growth consultancy specializing in media. We help advertisers on a life cycle to growth in 3 service areas: operations, partnerships, and optimization, that transform your media investments into real company growth. Whether you're planning an agency pitch, upgrading your media organization, want to learn new best practice, or simply get better performance from your media investments, you can find out more at idcomms.com/growth.